Hey guys, what is up? Super K-Man Rocks here, and we are here. It is time for my LPL Summer Split Finals overview and analysis video. It is the end of the Summer Split. It is the end of the true domestic regular season here before we get into the regional qualifiers. By the end of this video, we are going to know not one, but two teams that are officially going to the World Championships to represent the LPL, and we will know the order that they are going in, but even more important than that, we are going to find out our champion for the LPL in today's video. I hope you guys are excited. I know I am. If you are, let me know down in the comments section below. What did you expect from this series, and did it live up to your expectations? Very curious to know your thoughts and opinions down there. If you want to know my thoughts though, and you want to catch them maybe live, go ahead and check out the links in the description. I was on the analyst desk for LPL English during this series, and so if you want to see me react to everything live and kind of give my thoughts alongside some really great people, great casters and great desk, like everything, like everybody a part of that entire production was incredible. If you want to see that live, go ahead and check out the links in the description to go ahead and check out that VOD either on Twitch or on YouTube. But I am still going to be going over everything today. Do not worry. Just because I, was on the desk live doesn't mean you're getting any less in this video. So without further ado, let's get into things. If you are new here, how we do these big series is we are going to go game by game, talking about the advantages and disadvantages that each team was able to generate. I'll be giving a player of the game and a dud of the game for each individual game that we cover, and at the end of the series, I will be giving my finals MVP, my player of the series, to tie everything into a nice, neat little bow. There is not a ton to preview. We will be talking a little bit about the regional qualifiers after this, just to kind of give some context as to where these teams are landing, and especially because, there's potentially a team in this series that could be in the regional qualifiers, depending on the result that ends up going down. But you guys know, most of today is going to be spent talking about the finals themselves. Without further ado, let's get into the analysis. Of course, you can kind of already see it up on your screen here. It was a matchup between the number 3 seeded Bilibili Gaming and the number 1 seeded Top Esports, and I said them in that order because, of course, this was your matchup in upper bracket finals to get here in the first place. BLG ends up taking that series 3-2 to punch their ticket. They have yet to lose a playoff series so far, and that's a really big deal. Going into this, it's really, I would say, difficult to face a team that you just lost to, especially in the way that TES just lost to BLG, and be able to keep your momentum and your confidence up. That is, kind of compounded by the fact that Top Esports has not really been able to get over the hump, and they've kind of had their playoff woes and, best of 5 woes across the second half of the year. There are some concerns in that regard, but TES definitely coming into this series with a lot of momentum after, pretty thoroughly beating anyone's legend. I think it was clear who the better team was in that series, and, we kind of covered that yesterday when we talked about the two of them, but I think both of these teams have advantages and disadvantages against each other in particular. When you're talking about Bilibili Gaming, what you are going to talk about is how good this team's hands are, because that really is the story with BLG. Their macro is questionable, and I think that it's fair to say that it's questionable. They don't really do a lot of things that are really high level from a macro perspective. Their early games are definitely not the top of the league. Like, they're okay at them because their players are really good at generating leads for themselves, but they're certainly not dominant in that phase of the game. I don't think their mid games or late games have been particularly good. We saw that at MSI when they were really struggling to be able to close things out, even after getting leads against teams like T1. They just were not, strong enough to be able to finish games off. I don't think there is an area of their game macro-wise that is a strength, but you cannot underestimate the talent of this team, and sometimes that is enough to be the best in a region. Like, even one of the best regions in the world, like the LPL, when you have players like Knight, like Bin, like Elk, like On, whoever the jungler is in here, like, these are some of the most talented players in the entire world. Knight is the best player in the LPL. Bim is the best top laner in the LPL. Elk is one of the best AD carries in the world. Like, these are players that absolutely should be in the finals, and they should be leading the finals. That's why this Bilibili Gaming team is here right now, is because they are talented enough to be able to outplay most of the teams that they've gone into, and they've gotten enough out of their key role players to be able to push themselves forward. Now, is that going to be the case against teams that step up? I don't know. Like, this team is very talented, and sometimes, again, like, talent means more than macro. Like, that really is just kind of the case in League, especially in current League where Fearless is a lot more prevalent. If you are a player that can just win in matchups that you're not supposed to, all of a sudden the game becomes infinitely easier for you to play. So that's where I think BLG are going to be looking to get their advantages. I think you're looking mid lane, and I think you're looking top lane as places where BLG can definitely win, but mid is it, right? Like, Knight is the guy for BLG. He is the reason they're in the finals. Elk was excellent in that upper bracket series, but Knight has been the best player in the LPL this year. It's his turn to step up, and he's got the chance to break a record here today for the most LPL titles of anybody in history. Absolutely mammoth stat. So We'll see if he can pull through, because Top Esports definitely are going to be coming in pretty motivated in this series, I think, to say the least, in terms of where they are at. Number 1 seed in the regular season in split number 3. I guess we can go over the whole year, right? Like, these guys go into the playoffs in split number 1 in the winter split, and they're kind of underdogs. They run the lower bracket, and they win the entire league. They underperform at first stand, but they come back domestically and are the number 1 seed again coming out of the regular season. In split number 2, they have a catastrophic playoff collapse, going out in 5th, 6th place, even as the number 1 seed in the playoffs, just because they underperformed. There's really nothing to say. There was no reason that they should have lost to really either of the teams they lost to. The Bilibili gaming team they beat, or that beat them, I should say, was not the best version of BLG, as we definitely know now. And then they go and lose to WE in the lower bracket. That's basically unacceptable. They come out again in split 3, and they're the number 1 seed again. But the questions remain: can this team translate their good regular season performances into actual best of 5 success? Well, so far the answer to that has been yes. They've been able to take down basically every other top team in the league besides Bilibili Gaming. And that's the question, right? Is BLG just, do they have a natural advantage against a team like Top Esports? On paper, I certainly don't think so. The ways that Top Esports end up winning, I think, are more conducive to actually winning in a big series like this. Their macro in the early game in particular is infinitely better. Now, they're not the most consistent late game team. You're going to see multiple scenarios where they are just, bleeding resources in the early late game. I would say mid to late game. That's where Top Esports really struggle to continuously pressure their advantages, because they just are greedy in terms of their setups. Now, that is kind of the case for a lot of LPL teams in particular, but Top Esports, I think, is the worst offender of that particular issue. But that doesn't take away from the fact that this is the best early game team in the LPL and one of the best early game teams in the entire world. Kanavi is the one to focus on for that. He is the best player on Top Esports right now. He is the best jungler in the entire league. I don't think that that's a debatable thing to talk about right now. I love Tarzan, I really do, but I think Kanavi has just been better than him so far in 2025 if you take the whole year into account. Obviously you can talk a little bit about split number 2 and Tarzan being really important towards AL there, but as we saw in the previous series when these two teams faced off in lower bracket finals, Kanavi was better, and I think he's really cemented himself as somebody that can step up, and BLG's jungle situation is the problem for them. They have not been able to find any sort of consistency in that role. They're a 6-man roster, and they cannot click with either Beichuan or Shadow in that role. So if Kanavi can take advantage of the jungle matchup, watch out for Top Esports to be better here today. Jackie Love, I think, is in really good form right now. He was okay, I would say, against BLG. A couple of good moments, a couple of really bad moments, but if he can step up and be better here today, all of a sudden that completely changes everything about him as well. You have players like 369 that have at times been the best players in their role. Hong, I think, is on fire right now. He's been better than On for a majority of this split. The big question mark is Cream in the mid lane, who has been very good in this playoff run. I do want to give him credit for that, but, Cream versus Knight is the disadvantage for Top Esports. And then I think for Bilibili, like Beichuan or Shadow into Kanavi, it's Beichuan for game number 1. Like him into Kanavi, that is a mismatch, I would say, in favor of Top Esports. And so it's just about who can take advantage of their mismatches more. I believed in Top Esports in this series. As you guys know from the end of my previous one, I predicted Top Esports 3-1 in this series to win their LPL championship, to get back on top after the winter split. Am I going to be right? Am I going to be wrong? Well, the only way to know is to go game by game, and that means starting off with game number 1. So let's get into it. The winner of game number 1 was Top Esports. They are going to take game number 1. They're going to go up in this series 1-0. And this was a pretty good game number 1, I would say, all things considered, from them. I think this is basically exactly what we were looking for. A little bit slower than maybe I would have personally played this game, but when you have Azir Kaisa as a late game win condition, you're not exactly terrified of anything going, unbelievably wrong if you are Top Esports in this one. As it goes later and later, as long as you can get into good team fight positions, things are going to be just fine. A couple of good plays made by Top Esports, a couple of really bad plays made by Bilibili Gaming on the other side that end up really costing them. But as I said on the analyst desk, I think this was really a team effort from TES and kind of a team effort from BLG. This is one of the hardest games I've had in terms of both player and dud of the game, because I don't think there was really a clear answer for either in terms of where you wanted to go with it. So I landed on Kanavi for player of the game here for game number 1. I think Cream was justified. He got it on broadcast, and I certainly can't be all that mad about that. He had a huge lead in terms of the mid lane matchup. I love this matchup for Azir, and on R1, I think that this is a really, I guess, easy pick to lock in. Like, Knight going Aurora as the answer to Azir is just not something that I particularly think is good. And I talked about that a bit on the broadcast. I think that there were quite a few problems, in my opinion, with the Aurora pick and generally some of the picks in this draft as well. I think Wukong also was going to struggle a lot in this game, but Kanavi still has to be the one to take advantage of it. He still has to be the one to push forward, and he did exactly that. I think he didn't get enough credit for how active he was in the mid game. You know, that part of the game that I talked about Top Esports really struggling in the preamble, I think that's where they were really good, in particular in game number 1. And if they're going to be like that, then all of a sudden the entire calculus changes, right? Top Esports become mega favored, because that's the one part of the game that I think BLG is just straight up better in than Top Esports is that mid game. But Kanavi really put his foot to the pedal here, and he absolutely steamrolled through them, I think, alongside Cream, who just team fought really well, going deathless on that Azir. But if mid jungle are just going to be better for Top Esports, again, mid lane, you know, the key factor for Bilibili Gaming, if you can take that out of the equation, let Knight go 1-0 and 0 on the Aurora in game number 1, all of a sudden things become a lot easier. So credit to Kanavi and credit to Cream for being the one to actually capitalize on that. This was quite a boring game number 1, but I think Cream was doing everything he could to get small resource leads over Knight. He was up about 30, 40 CS by the time we hit about 20 minutes into the game. That's a pretty substantial lead, I would say, for the Azir. And I think we were looking at some fantastic team fights from him. One, in particular, really fantastic team fight in the upper river that ended up really changing the game. He, can play Azir. I think that there were moments where it was getting concerning in this playoff run where it's like, man, has this guy just forgotten how to play this champion because he was really good at it last year and he was really good at it on OMG. This was like the non-assassin that he would always feel comfortable going to. Well, here you go. This is the kind of more classic Cream Azir game rather than what we've been getting in 2025, which I think has been significantly worse quality from him. Happy to see that he's able to do that against Knight, of all people, in this gigantic series. And like I said, he got broadcast player of the game. I certainly can't be all that upset by that. Jackie Love, Hong, 369, they capitalize a little bit off the fact that Kanavi and Cream are very far ahead. Jackie Love capitalizes on Elk, making a pretty big mistake in the early game, but outside of that, he was pretty far down in this game for a majority of the time. I don't think this was a Kai'Sa game to remember. And then Hong and 369 were pretty solid. I think Hong in particular is not going to get the credit he deserves for this game, but pretty solid Rakan performance. So overall, nice stuff for Top Esports. Can't be too upset by that for game number 1. And for Bilibili on the other side, Beichuan coming back in after Shadow ends up, coming in for game 4 and 5 against Top Esports last time and elevating them across the rest of the series. We'll see if this is just the honeymoon buff. Again, I'm not going to spoil anything. Actually, I will, because it's the next game. Shadow does come in for game number 2, and so maybe Beichuan just came in to lose game number 1. I don't know what they were looking to see. I don't think he was the problem in this game. I don't think he was great, but I also don't think he did anything egregious or anything like that. I think he just kind of got out-tempoed playing Wukong into Pantheon, and like that's going to happen every once in a while. Like there's not a ton you can do to deal with that. Dud of the game was really hard, though, because I don't think anybody on BLG really misplayed in any major ways. I think the only real misplays I can think of were Elk, and this is despite the fact that Elk was up in gold basically throughout the entirety of this game, even giving over kills. I think he was fine for this team. I just think the Unara had so many resources, so many reasons to be in a good spot this game, so many free kills donated over to that champion, and yet Elk couldn't really do the damage necessary to win fights in the late game, and I get that this comp is hard. I was saying on broadcast that I just don't really trust the BLG comp to be able to fight in the later part of the game, but Unara has to be the one to step up. She has to be the one to melt through Top Esports, and this champion is broken. You B1'd it for a reason, and I just don't think Elk was relevant enough. I don't think this is the worst game in the world. I don't really think anybody deserved dead of the game here. You can make a case that BLG as a team got dead of the game because their macro is so bad and they're bad at adapting to a lot of different scenarios, but, I don't really do that on the channel. A player had to get it, and for me, I think Elk was the most, noteworthy in this game. I think you could give it to On. Again, maybe you give it to Beichuan or even Bin, who wasn't even involved in a single kill throughout this entire game. Maybe even Knight. Knight, again, was down like 30 CS for a majority of this game going into Cream. So, you're not necessarily looking at a good situation for BLG, but because of that, nobody lost extra hard. It's just kind of everybody losing a little bit and ending up kind of causing BLG to get out-tempoed and not really be in a great spot. I think overall there are some pretty easy adaptations for BLG. As I said on the desk, I want to see this team play early game. I think they need to start generating leads. I think if you allow Top Esports to get things like Pantheon, obviously they can't because it's fearless, but if you allow them to get champions that can do similar things to that can control the map and the tempo of the game and basically play the style that they want, then things are going to be way too easy for Top Esports to be able to win. They need to be able to kind of counter them. In a lot of instances, BLG need to take the fight to Top Esports. For TES, you got to keep your foot on the gas. It's likely that, things are going to change at some point this series. Shadow coming in for game number 2, you don't really know what he's going to look like. Much more of a carry-oriented player than someone like Beichuan is, and so you need to make sure that you continue to pressure out BLG. If you allow these players with good hands to execute, it doesn't really matter what happened in game number 1, but this is a massive game. If TES can get that 2-0 lead, all of a sudden things look very dire for BLG already in this series, but if BLG can bounce back, this is basically exactly what happened in upper bracket. They go to game 3, tied at 1 apiece, and it becomes a best of 3, which we know both teams can win. So, which of those things will happen? Well, the winner of game number 2 was Bilibili Gaming, they are going to take game number 2. They are going to even up the series at 1 apiece, and thank God we have a series on our hands. I was a bit concerned that this was going to be, kind of top esports favored. Like I said, kind of going into this, I think TES just kind of have a little bit of magic behind them right now, but Bilibili, you want to talk about magic. Magic, magic is created. Like, you can absolutely formulate your own honeymoon phase if you need to. Shadow comes in the jungle, and once again, this team absolutely decimates top esports after a major jungle shift. This was a huge game for BLG because they didn't just win, they decimated them. Like I said, this was not particularly close in any real way. Like, this was not hard for BLG to win. I think there is a way for top esports to be able to get out of this, but I don't think they played to any of their win conditions, and I think they made it pretty hard on themselves in draft, which I will go ahead and talk about here because, I've kind of been avoiding talking about drafts here in the LPL because I cover them so much on the analyst desk that it feels like I'm kind of just repeating points over and over again, but I think this one is just too important to not talk about. This is a terrible draft from TES. This is unacceptable in game number 2. There are two things here that I think are just bad. First off, you're leaving Jarvan up on B1 for game number 2. That is already a very big risk because Jarvan can affect the game in a lot of clear ways, and it kind of limits the champions you can play into him. One of those champions is not Xin Zhao. I think this is a very, very Jarvan favored matchup. I think this is not something that you can acceptably pick, and I get that top esports wanted to keep the pressure up from game number 1, but there are plenty of other champions in the game that I think can realistically do, what Xin Zhao wants to do in the early game here without having the bad skirmishing potential into a champion that can basically stop his entire kit from being all that useful. So I already think you're behind the 8 ball from going R2. And then I think R5 is unacceptable. Like, you cannot pick Ziggs in this game. Ezreal Karma is omega strong in this draft. And obviously, Ezreal Karma is just strong. It's a very good bot lane duo. I think it's one of the more consistent ones in the game. I think you have to have the right setup for it, but in the right hands and with the right players, I think you can get unbelievable outputs from that bot lane. We've seen it, at every level throughout all of this year, but Ziggs is simply just not an answer in this game. Not only is it taking Jackie Love out of the ability to carry the game and limiting your tools in the late game after you already drafted an Orianna on R1. And so what are you even comboing for here? Like, what is the plan in the mid game? How are you ever supposed to play this out? But genuinely, the dream here for Ziggs, and the reason you end up picking it, is because you want to delay and stall out the Ezreal Karma. You want to make sure that when they push in, you can clear wave and you can stall the game out to get to a power spike in the late game. Well, that power spike is an Orianna, shockwave full combo doing a ton of damage, being the one champion that actually scales into the late game in this entire game on both sides. And yet Cream is building Seraph's Roa. Like, he is building 0 damage. He's building full, mana utility, like the standard mid lane build here. If your plan is to pick the Ziggs in order to stall the game out alongside things like Mbessa and Rel that can create in the back half of the game to play for Orianna, then what is Orianna doing? It just does not feel like anything made sense here for top esports. I think they threw away game number 2 in basically terrible ways. Like, they lost in draft and then it got even worse in game. They played bad. Like, the execution was super off in this game. There's honestly not a ton to talk about in terms of how this game went down, which is why I felt comfortable spending so much time on the draft, because genuinely, I think I came out of this draft feeling like, well, top esports are going to have to do something miraculous to win this game, and they didn't. It just is as simple as that. We'll talk highly about BLG, though. Elk is going to get player of the game for me here. Knight got it on broadcast. Hell yeah, man. Like, they were both really good. Knight ended up popping off a bit more in the late game, but when you look at how BLG ended up really, dominating the game early and snowballing this out of control, I think the Ezreal was the most relevant piece in that equation. You can't give Elk Ezreal. This is still his best champion. I don't care that Ezreal is not as strong as he used to be right now. This can still be a major carry, and this lane is very dangerous. Like I said in draft, like, this Ezreal Karma is kind of omega strong. There's nothing in the entire game that easily answers these two. Early game, they're going to get a free lane because you're going into Ziggs Rel, who can't punish you in any easy way. So at the bare minimum, you're going to be able to shove in and be able to generate this gigantic gold lead. And then if you can utilize that alongside, I don't know, maybe a Jarvan Galio combo, then all of a sudden Ezreal becomes the scariest thing that you could possibly try and run into, because it's a free gold lead and you have all of this setup. So it's really well played by Elk. I think his positioning in these fights was astronomically better than Jackie Love's, who was pretty bad throughout a majority of this game. But I mean, Elk was in a great position to succeed. Knight goes deathless as well on the Galio. He even has a better KP percentage. So if you, again, wanted to give it to him, I certainly don't blame you for that. He has that gigantic fight where he basically 3v1 cleans up at the end of this game. Knight is mammoth. Like, there's not really a lot to say. Both of them were excellent. I think Shadow was very good in this game, but he also didn't really have to do a lot. Like, this game was free from the start because his lanes were dominating. Bin had a really strong game. On had a really strong game. it just went BLG's way. Like, there's not really a lot to break down. They ended up getting a lead that they should have gotten, and they never relinquished it. And for Top Esports, we've already gone into all of the problems, but their gameplay certainly didn't help things in terms of how things got executed. Cream's build is gonna make me vomit. Again, I'm not the most anti, Seraphs into, or Roa into Seraphs guy in the entire universe. I actually really like that build in certain scenarios. We will talk about that later on in this series, but this team comp relies entirely on Orianna being able to kill people in the late game, and we saw, like, in these late game team fights, I get it, they were down 10k gold by the time anybody actually got into a 5v5, but we saw in the late game that Cream would shockwave people and do a quarter of their health bar. Like, full combo from Orianna was just not doing anything, and if that's what you're playing for, if that's your win condition, you are so beyond cooked, it's not even funny. Like, it is truly ridiculous. But again, the gameplay was terrible. Hong was just awful in this game. I mean, one of the worst top lane plays you will ever see, sitting in the alcove for minutes, like genuine minutes, only to go in on Bin and die in the 1v2, and Yorick picks up a free 1v2 kill. It is genuinely one of the worst things you will ever see. Completely unacceptable from Hong. I think Kanavi had a really bad game, but his game is hard here because how do you even play Xin Zhao into the comp on the other side of this? 369 was kind of running it, a couple of missed ultimates on Mbessa that really ended up coming back to bite them. We already talked a bit about Jackie Love and Cream's mistakes. Like, Top Esports were just off their game in game number 2. This is free momentum back over to BLG and a free game number 3 tied up at 1 apiece. You have to win this one. You have to pull something back because this was such a demoralizing, loss for Top Esports that if you go down again in game number 3, things get out of control really quickly. But BLG just absolutely decimated them. Can they carry that momentum over and take the lead for the first time in this series? Well, the winner of game number 3 was Top Esports. They are going to take game number 3. They are going to go back up in this series 2-1, and they're going to do so in very necessary fashion. This was a very weird game, all things considered, I think, in terms of how it broke down, but Top Esports come out on top and end up making the most of it. It looked like BLG was actually in a position to potentially capitalize on some mistakes and make a comeback. Like, I think that might even be a little bit rich of me to say, but just didn't end up happening. Top Esports were a little bit better in this game, and definitely I think the positioning battle ends up being won overall by Top Esports, despite the fact that I think On was excellent in this on the Bard. Like, truly an exceptionally good Bard performance from the support for BLG. Top Esports just had a few too many things going for them. We're going to talk about draft here because, again, I think it's kind of relevant in terms of just why this game broke down the way it did. First thing I want to point out, I really do think that this, like, Cassio into Ryze counter pick is just donezo. Like, I get it. I played League in 2014 just like everybody else. Like, I understand that Cassio beat Ryze, and that was always the thing that everybody talked about is, oh, Cassio hard counters Ryze, and we saw it in Pro, we saw it in solo queue. Anytime anybody would pick the Ryze champion, then all of a sudden it would be answered by Cassiopeia. That's gone. Like, it's been gone for a little while. Like, Ryze is genuinely better in this matchup because he can shove the wave a lot quicker than Cassio can with fewer resources than Cassio can, and he can make more plays with this jungler. It's just not a Cass favored matchup anymore. I'm sorry, this champ needs better support around her in order to be able to deal with the Ryze in the same way that you normally would, and, Knight doesn't really have that in this game. Kanavi was the one who was on the more aggressive jungler, and he was the one that was able to play a lot more aggro. Once again, for the 3rd straight game, it is the team that has the early game comp and the team that should be able to generate that pressure that ends up coming out on top. What is Zed's biggest weakness? The mid game, where he can't really function as aggressively as maybe he wants. Well, here you go. You got a Renekton, a Ryze, and a Varus that can end up really easily kind of transitioning you into that late game, which is kind of what happened. Like, the mid game wasn't perfect from Top Esports, but it certainly was good enough to get them to the later part of the game where Cream could take over in a lot of these fights. So really nice stuff from Top Esports. For BLG, I think the Cassio is kind of the problem in this draft, if we're being entirely honest. I think that there are a couple of other things that maybe you could do to maximize it. Ornn, should help outscale. I think BLG probably should have won this game. They end up winning a couple of fights towards the back half that put them in a pretty good spot, and then, basically gold lead even because of Ornn items, but it just doesn't really matter. They don't really have the execution, and Cream pops off. He's the best player on the Rift. Cream is player of the game. Needed this one. I think Cream has looked really good so far in the finals. Game 1, Game 3, I think both of those games were absolutely massive from him. I criticized his build in game number 2 because I think it really cost them. This is the game where I think you can point to and say, here's why you build Seraphs and Roa. Here's why those 2 items are incredibly good, because look at the fights that end up breaking down for Top Esports. You need that extra health bar coming in from the Seraphs, and Roa was incredibly valuable overall in this game to give some survivability and some, just general scaling power over to Top Esports. And you know why he was allowed to do that? Because Zed is his jungler and Varus is his AD carry. There are plenty of other other ways to be able to capitalize in the mid game, and you're not relying on this mega high damage Rise build at 25 minutes to win you the game. You can survive on 2 items because you have other champions that can supplement your lack of damage. BLG, on the other hand, Knight, on the other hand, who's dead of the game here, not only ends up dying 2v1 in the mid lane to a play he has no business dying to, not only teleports onto the top side and ends up dying under tower as, well, I guess not even under tower. The tower was gone by the point he got there in one of the single worst teleport plays I've ever seen in my entire life, but he ends up with the worst build that you could possibly imagine. Once again, going Roa Seraphs on Cassio, and then you look at this draft and you go, wait a second, isn't Cassio supposed to do a ton of damage in the later part of this game? Isn't that your out? Is that Cassio's going to be able to shred through the front line and be able to, front to back this game? Not anymore, because at 2 items, you just don't have the damage. Zed and Varus are going to be able to outdamage this Cassio, and all of a sudden this scaling teamfight late game that you have built is gone. Like, I just don't understand where people are going wrong in this instance. They obviously know something I don't. I'm not sitting here trying to say that Knight and Cream are dumber than me, because I don't think that that's the case. I would never try and make that case. I just don't really understand what the thought process is. Why do you feel like you need Roa? Why do you feel like you need Seraphs? Like, why do you have to go these items? I guess it's a bit more understandable on Cassio, but just like, why? Like, it feels like you're running the game into the ground just to get a few more extra tank stats, and Cream, meanwhile, just gets to kind of do his own thing, where Kanavi and Jaculov get to supplement all that damage. And again, like, if you're doing 3/4 of someone's health bar instead of 100% of someone's health bar with a combo, then you need Zed or Varus to be able to do the other quarter. Top Esports had that and BLG didn't, so Cream is player of the game. Again, like I said, Knight is also dud of the game because he made some horrible plays. He ends up building, in my opinion, wrong in this game, and I think everything just kind of was bad from Knight. This is genuinely one of the worst games he's played all playoffs long, and this is a terrible spot. You don't need me to explain to you how important Game 3 in a best of 5 is. I've talked about this all the time. When you're tied up at 1 apiece, Game 3 is the most important game of the entire series, and Knight ran it down in game number 3. Pretty terrible showing from him. I think that there are other players like Shadow that just couldn't really get anything done in this game, but On was electric. Like, he was sensationally good on the Bard, and it honestly feels bad that they wasted this Bard performance on a game like this, because there was never a chance for them to be able to win it. But BLG end up falling, and now they are down 2-1 in this series. Their backs are up against the wall, but they've been in this position before against Top Esports. Upper bracket finals, they were down 2-1 coming out of game number 3. They won game 4, they won game 5, they took that series, and they pushed themselves here. Can they do the same, at the very least stay alive here in game number 4, or is Top Esports going to make my prediction right? Are they going to close things out in game number 4 and win their second LPL title of 2025? Well, the winner of game number 4 was Bilibili Gaming. They are going to take game number 4. They're going to even up the series at 2 apiece. And in our LPL Grand Finals, we are going to a Silver Scrapes game number 5. How could you ask for anything more? Have these games been sloppy? Have they been chaotic? Yes, but that's the LPL in a nutshell. We're not looking for perfect macro. We're not looking for unbelievable, mental play. We want to see 2 teams play with a lot of confidence and a lot of action, and that is what is happening right now. BLG pull out a massive Game 4 win, and they do so off the back of another incredibly dominant performance. It's been very fun to kind of follow the trajectory of this series, where Top Esports wins are pretty close. I think you look at game number 3 in particular, and you see BLG have a chance. Even game 1, I think, was a little bit more up in the air. Then you look at games 2 and 4, BLG's wins, they are the 2 biggest stomps in this series by far. They are demolishing Top Esports when they win games, and they look excellent in those scenarios. For TES on the other side, it's misplays, it's bad performances, it's general lack of understanding of where they need to be on the map. It's just a lot of problems coming in for the team. I don't even think their draft is unplayable. I think they have a huge mid-game advantage if they want it, and theoretically, Ahri should not be particularly relevant in this game, but alas, it's not just Ahri, it's Knight's Ahri, and that's what changes the entire equation. Knight is player of the game for game number 4. He needed this bounce-back performance after what I thought was a terrible Cassiopeia game in game number 3. He needed to come out here and dominate in the way that he did, and that's exactly what he did in this series on Ahri. He was able to step up and just take over. I mean, those charms were point and click, and usually I use that term in like he was landing, all the charms in the scenarios he was supposed to. This guy was just everywhere on the map. Like, it's not even fair to say that they were point and click. He was predicting movements with charms. Like, he just is ridiculously good at Ahri. There's a reason that his win rate on this champion is astronomically high, and it's, a champion that you don't really give over tonight. Like, it just doesn't happen. You do not give him this pick, and you do not allow him to operate on it, because he is going to take over. He's going to win the game on it, and that's exactly what he did here. Again, this should not be an Ahri game. Look at all of the threats on the other side. It's Nocturne Talia as the mid-jungle duo. Theoretically, Talia should have shove in this lane and should be able to roam more efficiently, and you can kind of nullify a lot of Ahri's potential in terms of engages in the mid lane because of the ground. She's, gonna get stunned up if she wants to even use her ultimate against Talia in lane, and then Nocturne's gonna be a lot more useful than the Poppy in the mid game here. If you can get any gold onto the Draven, then things actually could be pretty positive here. It does not matter. Knight is too good on Ahri. It genuinely is just a bit of a player diff. Now, I will say, Caitlyn Elise certainly does play into it a little bit. Elk and On, I thought were great. On, in particular, I thought was really good in this game on Elise. This is a bot lane these two have really gone towards this year. It's really been one of their most successful and certainly one of their most consistent as they get later and later into these best of fives, as a lot of the counters in lane start to get, out of the pool. Like, with the two games that BLG won, they were on Karma and Ezreal, and then they were on Caitlyn Elise. Like, that, I hope there's something to pull from that trend, in the sense that you want to win the game, then dominate the 2v2. You can get into good spots here, and you can take Jackie Love out of the game, and that's exactly what happened. And then, obviously, topside was very good. You don't go deathless on Cassante and Poppy if the game is not going really, really well. 369 was kind of okay in some of these fights. We're going to talk about what happened to Top Esports on the other side, but really, this was just one of those games where Shadow ended up, being in the right place at the right time. The Poppy was very useful in being able to shut down some of the aggressive plays coming in from Top Esports, and the Cassante certainly helped, but it was Ahri, it was Caitlyn, it was Elise that ended up taking over the game in terms of the champions that really made the biggest difference, and that's really encouraging. Again, Knight is the player that needs to step up here for BLG. He is the LPL. He is Bilibili Gaming, and so you want to see him perform in the biggest moment. He gets his signature champion, and he absolutely makes the most of it in Game 4, pushing this series to a game number 5. And for Top Esports on the other side, this is a very scary performance, because again, it's not just the overall showing of like, oh, your 2 losses in this series, you got kind of trounced, and obviously Red Side has not looked particularly good for you outside of game number 1. It's not just that, but this is the same exact script that you had in the upper bracket finals against Bilibili Gaming, where you go up 2-1 after game number 3 and then lose game 4. In that series, they lost game number 5. It has to be weighing at least a bit on their minds. You have players like Jackie Love who could be looking at this as potentially the last time that they make the finals. 369 was talking about, like, you never know, like, if you're going to be on a good enough team ever again, a team like this to ever get back to finals as consistently as Top Esports has been able to get back to this. The pressure is on for this team and for this org to make this happen right now, because they might not get a second chance. And I haven't really brought it up, but as a reminder, Top Esports has to win this series. Bilibili is already qualified for the World Championships. They're guaranteed a top 2 spot. Even if they lose this series, they go as the number 2 seed. They're number 1 in championship points, but Top Esports would be 3rd in championship points behind AL if they don't win this series. They have to win in order to go to Worlds. The qualification and just the pressure on Top Esports in this series is massive, and it is playing out on the Rift in terms of the mistakes that they are making. I thought Hong had another terrible game. He's having a really bad series on, basically doing what Hong did to him in that first Top Esports versus BLG series, where he was just infinitely better than him on the other side. Definitely not what you want to see out of a player in Hong that has generally been pretty consistent throughout all of this year. People will talk about finals nerves. He was really good in his last finals on LNG in 2023. I think people forget about that series. That was a 5-game set against that super team in JDG, and Hong was awesome. He was one of the best players on the Rift in that series, and so it's not finals nerves. I don't believe that Hong is a player that generally has finals nerves. Maybe it's just the situation and the scenario that's a bit different than last time, but he's just playing terrible. Like, there's nothing else really to say. I think Kanavi had a really bad game on the Nocturne. That pick has not looked successful really at all in any region. Talia is mega strong and mega broken, and I was shocked that it made it this far into the series, but it didn't work out here for Cream. I still believe Talia should be B1, compatible on basically every single comp in the game, but I guess a lot of these teams disagreed, and maybe they were right, because look at the way it performed in this one. Jackie Love never even got a cash out in this one. He ends up dying at like 15 minutes with almost 200, more than 200 adoration stacks, and that is a nightmare for a Draven player. He could just never get anything going on the bottom side of the map. And then, 369 had a couple of moments on the Mordekaiser where you're like, maybe he can take over some of these fights. But I mean, it's just, if that's your lackluster play, if you're down 10k gold and you're hoping Mordekaiser could pull something back, that's a nightmare scenario. Top Esports even played out some of these late game fights okay, but they were so far down in gold, it just didn't matter. We are 4 for 4 in the team that ends ends up dominating and drafting for early game, winning the game. There has been no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It is all about who can generate tempo. It does not matter if you scale. It does not matter what your mid game looks like. It's all about the early game between these two teams right now, and that's what I expect them to draft for going into game number 5. This is it. Winner take all. It's game 5 in the LPL Grand Finals. Top Esports and Bilibili Gaming. Only one is going to be able to come out on top and be your champion and your number 1 seed at the end of the year. Who will it be? Well, the winner of game number 5 was Bilibili Gaming. They are going to take game number 5. They are going to take this series 3-2, and your 2025 LPL Summer Split champions are once again Bilibili Gaming. Despite all odds, BLG are able to pull through. At no point this year have they felt really like the best team in the LPL. I thought they were going to be going into the Spring Split playoffs when I predicted them to win the league, but it didn't happen. Beichuan, coming in and completely changing the trajectory of the team didn't get them across anyone's legend in that playoff run. They come into this playoffs, I think, looking worse than they looked going into the Split 2 playoffs, and this was already a team that I think was underperforming their own expectations in a lot of different ways, but leave it up to BLG to be able to figure out a way to get a championship, and specifically leave it tonight to find a way to continue to top himself and become what is likely the GOAT of the LPL at this point. Honestly, I said it on broadcast, I'll say it again here. I think it's really hard to debate against Knight being the greatest LPL player of all time at this point. This win solidifies him as the only player in LPL history with 6 championships, and he's done that in just like 3 or 4 years. It's actually ridiculous how effective he's been. And that's not to say he wasn't effective before that. He was, one of the most dominant players in the world in 2020 and 2021. But really, I mean, it's 2022 onwards where he just has become an unstoppable player in terms of what he has turned into, and that is reflected here. Congratulations to BLG. Unfortunately for Top Esports, the team that ends up losing here in Game 5, this is pretty bad for them because not only do they not win the title, and obviously not only is it, kind of a really disappointing end for a player like Jackie Love, that this might be his last, at least, like, actual playoff domestic performance. He'll have a chance to do something else because this team is not qualified for Worlds. With this loss, they are 3rd in championship points, and they are going down to the regional qualifier. The happiest team coming out of this besides BLG is absolutely anyone's legend, who has now qualified for the World Championships as the number 2 seed out of the LPL, being 2nd in those championship points behind Bilibili Gaming. Congrats to them, but we can quickly talk about game number 5. This was the closest game of the entire series. It was very chaotic, very back and forth. I think both teams ended up playing quite poorly, a lot of mistakes coming in from both sides, but at the end of the day, it pays to have the best player on the Rift, and that was Knight, who's not only getting my Game 5 MVP, he's getting my Finals MVP. There was really not a lot of conversation in my head about who Finals MVP was. Knight was the best player on the Rift, and he absolutely deserved this award. What a massive showcase from a player that, we're not surprised to see step up in a big moment. We know that it's Knight. We know that this guy is unbelievable, but it's just so awesome to see him reaffirm that. When the best players in the world play like the best players in the world and really step up in the biggest moments in the world, when his back is up against the wall down 2-1 in a series, partly due to him, and he has his 2 best games of the entire playoffs in games 4 and 5, where he just gets to take over. It's ridiculous stuff. The Akali, basically 1v4 at the end of this game, is really what ends up catching a lot of people's attention, but he was super relevant throughout this entire game on Akali. The takeaway pick from Cream, his most played champion, he ends up playing it into him and absolutely decimates him. Really awesome stuff. I think it's realistic, though, to consider maybe somebody else for player of the game for Game 5 in particular, and that's Shadow in the jungle. I want to give so much credit where it's due on Shadow in terms of his actual performance, because this is easily the best game he's played in quite a long time as well. Shadow has definitely looked better than Beichuan. I've said that throughout basically all of this year. Shadow certainly gives you more upside because he's just better as a mechanical player. Beichuan, I think, is a little bit more controlled and certainly is a lot more, tempo oriented, which at times can be good, but this team can sometimes lack a lot of fire when they're playing with Beichuan. I think Shadow is much more aggressive in terms of the way that he shot calls for the team, and again, like I said, I think he just gives you a bit of a higher mechanical ceiling if you do want to go in that direction, but the Sejuani was massive on R5 here. It actually just completely shuts down a lot of what Top Esports want to do, and I think it's a really good pick. And I think Shadow executed really well, basically with the exception of a couple of top lane plays. Shout out the top lane dive that ended up going completely awry from Top Esports, where they miss absolutely everything, where Cream tries to flash Tibbers instead of flash queuing and just misses entirely, where Hong ends up missing his ultimate, where Shadow ends up missing his ultimate on top side as well. Like, basically everything just not working out for every side, but it ending up being much worse for Top Esports. Outside of that play, Shadow was basically perfect. I would say here in game number 5, he was essential in the late game, being able to land CC on priority targets and being able to lock people down. The pick game was much better coming in from Sejuani Akali than it was from Lee Sin Annie, and you know that that's not a good thing if you are Top Esports. So I want to give a lot of credit to Shadow. He definitely is the better jungler, and he should be the one at Worlds that is, you know, playing the games for this team. He is Pioshik, and unfortunately I think Beichuan is Juhan in terms of like that example if you really want to go in that way, but not quite enough for Finals MVP. Knight was simply too good in game 4 and really in game 2 on the Galio as well. Want to give a big shout out to Elk. He had another very good finals performance. I think he was better than Jackie Lev. Even if Jackie Lev was pretty good on the other side, I think he was arguably the best player for Top Esports in this series. Elk was better, and that's an important thing. That was the case in the previous series, and that is the case now. Elk has really reclaimed one of his spots at the top of the LPL in terms of being one of the best AD carries in the world and potentially the best AD carry in the league on gapped Hong in this tournament, or not in this tournament, in this series, and that's certainly not something we could have said earlier in the tournament. That's kind of the point I was trying to make there, where, you know, On was worse than Hong the last time these two teams played. It really did feel like the better support lost in upper bracket finals. That was not the case here. On was excellent here today, especially down the stretch, and Hong had a lot of mistakes and ended up being kind of a big problem for Top Esports. Bin finally showed up here for game number 5. We talked about Kanavi playing well, but Shadow was better, I think, in the back end of this series. BLG absolutely deserved to win today, much more so than they did in the upper bracket finals, in my opinion, and they deserve to be your 2025 LPL champions. And then for Top Esports on the other side, very demoralizing loss. Basically the worst case scenario for them in terms of just how things are breaking down. To get so close, to set yourself up so well going up 2-1 after game number 3, and to throw it all away, it's just terrible. It's got to feel so bad, and off the back of just a couple of bad performances and maybe a comp that needed to scale a bit better into the late game. But I understand why, after how this series has gone, you'd play Lee Sin, Lucian, Nico, Annie, right? Like, you want to play this early game comp because that's what's been working for every single team in this series. Unfortunately, this is finally the game that goes 40 plus minutes and you just don't have the firepower to overcome it. Cream is the obvious choice for dead of the game. A miserable Annie performance from him. He had a good series, but it's not going to be remembered because in game 5, when it mattered the most, he let his team down. You know, people kind of call him baby Zeka. I know I'm kind of in the camp for saying that he is definitely like, you know, 80, 75% of Zeka in terms of what he is as a player. He did not inherit the clutch gene. That's unfortunately part of the 15% that he does not have. It's the 25% he doesn't have, right? It's just bad in terms of, you know, Cream not being able to step up. This guy did win a championship in winter, and so you can't say that he's entirely hopeless in that regard. I really thought Cream was going to start stepping up after that awesome playoff run in Split 1. Just never happened. It feels like he just was not on the same level as Knight in the back end of this series after having such a good game number 3 and really a great game number 1 as well. Really frustrating to see that, but this Annie was just as bad as you could have expected. I mean, the flash Tibbers on the top side that we already talked about, it really didn't feel like he understood how to play Annie at a high-end level, and that's not a difficult champion to be able to operate in pro. You just have to flash Q instead of flash R. Like, it really is that simple, but Cream, not very good here. I think Hong had a terrible series. This is the worst he has played all split long. That is not even up for debate. This was awful, awful stuff from him. He was the worst player on the Rift throughout the entire series as a whole, and I think that was a big reason why Top Esports lost. Kanavi didn't step up and play like the superstar we know he can be. You know, Jackie Love was good, but he wasn't better than Elk. 369 was basically completely irrelevant throughout this entire series. There just isn't a lot to talk about for Top Esports that make you feel better about this team, and now this team has to go down to the regional qualifier. They have to face Invictus Gaming, which we'll preview and talk about at the end of this video in that first round. If they can't get the 3 seed, which again, it's just one best of 5, whether or not they get the 3 seed or not, like 4th seed is probably not making Worlds coming out of the LPL. They have to play the play-ins against T1. That is a nightmare scenario, so you don't want to be in that spot. Top Esports are one best of 5 away from potentially being in the worst case scenario for them, and it's all because of this game number 5 loss. Truly a monumental problem and a mistake that they ended up making, but now, you know, they've made their bed. They have to go ahead and lay in it. And for Bilibili Gaming, congratulations to them. They have earned this championship. They go undefeated in best ofs in the playoffs here. Absolutely astounding. Remember, they won upper bracket. They didn't lose a single series, so really impressive stuff. Knight ends up setting the record for most championships in the LPL. Bilibili is going as your number 1 seed. This team is awesome, and I'm glad they finally have figured out a way to start stepping up. All right, but that is going to do it for my LPL Finals overview and analysis video. Congratulations to Bilibili Gaming. They've done it. They are your 2025 LPL Summer Split champions. Bin, Shadow, Beichuan, Knight, Elk, and On. All 6 of them did end up playing in the finals, so I feel good about giving all of them, a championship graphic and, calling them all champions. Even if Beichuan lost game number 1, he at the very least played for the championship winning team in the finals, and that is definitely more than deserving of being able to hoist the Silver Dragon Trophy, one of the coolest trophies, by the way, in all of esports. Knight was my finals MVP, but we can talk about some of the ramifications and what it means moving forward. First and foremost, Bilibili is going to Worlds as the #1 seed. It doesn't really matter as much now that Swiss is the only real format. It doesn't really, change all that much for BLG. It might change their first round draw, though, which could theoretically be relatively important. And then with BLG's win, it now means that anyone's legend has qualified for the World Championships as the #2 seed coming out of the LPL. So no regional qualifier for AL. They immediately get slotted in because they are second in championship points after their good results throughout all of the splits. So congratulations to them as well. I'm happy to see that team at Worlds. They needed to be able to run back some of those international performances they had earlier on in the year, but that means we get to talk a bit about the regional qualifier now, and this is where things get interesting. 4 teams enter, 2 will technically exit as teams that are going to Worlds. The 3 seed will immediately be slotted into the Swiss stage along with 1 and 2, but the 4 seed will have to play a play-in series against the 4th seed from the LCK, which, spoiler alert, again, I haven't covered this, I'm covering this later today as this video goes up, is T1 over in the LCK, so certainly don't feel very good about that. You do not want to be the #4 seed coming out of the LPL. It's Top Esports and Invictus Gaming as the 3 versus 4 to try to get that #3 seed. Top Esports have to be able to bounce back. If they end up losing that and IG goes to Worlds as the 3 seed, all of a sudden things become disastrous for Top Esports, but I think they are better than IG, and I think they will get that #3 seed. And then the other matchup and the other 2 teams, it's JD Gaming at #5 and then Weibo Gaming at #6, and those 2 teams will face off. The winner of that will play the loser of Top Esports and Invictus Gaming to try and get that #4 seed to at least get the chance to play in the play-in stage. As a reminder, ASI now exists, the new Asia International Tournament that's basically if Worlds is the Champions League, it's like the Europa League, where the 5th, 6th, 7th place teams from the LCK and LPL, and then the 4th and 5th place teams from the LCP will be playing a little bit of a tournament, and so it's not doomed for the teams that don't end up making Worlds. At least they'll play some international games. I think that's a brilliant addition, by the way, and they need to get the West in on that. I think as many international games as these teams can play is good, because international experience is so important for these players that might not be good enough to go as a top 4 seed out of their region or a top 3 seed out of their region, but might be, needing to get there within the next year or so. I think that's the kind of thing that can really help players level up, and it gives these teams something to do when the year is kind of coming to a close, when everything kind of feels like it's over. So definitely feel good about that tournament. But my predictions right now, it does feel like Top Esports are going to go as the #3 seed. Who goes as #4? I don't really know, man. I want to say it's Invictus, but my heart's telling me that they're going to choke it away, and that somehow randomly Weibo Gaming is going to end up going to Worlds again. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Very curious to know what your thoughts and opinions are there. But that's going to do it. I do hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, leave a like. It really does mean a lot to me. It lets me know you guys are enjoying the content, and it does help get this video out to a lot more people, which I'm always very appreciative of. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button. Of course, we're going to be covering the regional qualifiers in the same way that we did for this series on this channel over the course of the next couple of days, but we cover all 3 of the other major regions as well: LTA, LCK, and LEC. If you want playoff coverage and Worlds coverage kind of coming up right around the corner, this is the place for it. Hit subscribe and hit that bell. As a reminder, I am still doing LPL English, and I'm not done for the year. I will be on the desk not only for the JDG Weibo regional qualifier series, but for the final regional qualifier series as well. Whoever ends up, winning and losing, I guess, their individual series. I will be on the analyst desk for both of those, so check out the links in the description to the YouTube, the Twitch for LPL English, and quite frankly, just follow anyways for Top Esports versus Invictus Gaming. You'll want to be around for that. But with all that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all